Rain still clung to my cardigan when I climbed the porch steps. That Tuesday, 2 grocery bags biting into my fingers. I was humming. I always hum on grocery days. It was a habit Frank used to tease me about, and I never grew out of it. I slid my key into the lock. It didn't turn. I jiggled it. Nothing. I figured the lock was sticking again, the way old locks do in humid weather. So I knelt down, set my bags on the mat, and looked closer. The brass was wrong. Too shiny. Too new. Someone had changed my lock. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. A text from David sent an hour earlier, one I had somehow missed. "Mom, for your own safety, we changed the locks. You're too old to be living alone. We'll talk this weekend." I read it twice. Then a third time, waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. I stood there on the porch of the house I had lived in for 34 years, holding 2 bags of groceries I no longer had anywhere to put. The bread was still warm from the bakery. I remember thinking, absurdly, that it would go stale before I found a way inside. My name is Margaret Ellery. I am 68 years old. For 31 years, I taught music to elementary school children. I retired with a pension, a bad knee, and more construction paper thank you cards than I ever had room to keep. I have been a widow for 6 years. My husband Frank died on a Thursday in March, and I have measured time in befores and after ever since. I raised our son David mostly alone in the summers, while Frank worked overtime to keep us afloat. I had a scholarship to study piano once. I let it go without much of a fight. I believed one thing my whole life. If you give your family everything, they will never let you fall. I built my entire world on that belief. I was wrong. I met Frank at a community orchestra rehearsal. He played cello badly and knew it. I played piano well and let him know that too. He walked me home afterward, past the bakery on Larkspur Lane, and told me someday he'd buy me the whole street if I let him. We started with one room above that bakery. The smell of bread woke us every morning. Our bed frame was borrowed. Our dishes didn't match. I didn't mind any of it. I had him. 3 years later, we stood in an empty living room on that same street, holding the keys to a small blue house with a crooked mailbox. Frank grabbed my hands and spun me around right there on the bare floor. "This is the last house we'll ever need, Maggie," he said. I mean it. He meant it. We skipped vacations for years. Frank took a second job installing HVAC systems on weekends, coming home smelling of metal and sweat. I tutored piano after school, squeezing lessons between grading papers, building a little stack of cash in a coffee tin above the fridge. Every extra dollar went toward the mortgage. Every extra hour went toward the house. We paid it off 11 years early. Frank framed the deed himself. His handwriting is still on it, tucked in the corner where he wrote the date in blue ink. Paid in full. He hung it in the hallway where I still walk past it every single day. The night the last payment cleared, we sat on the porch together. No wine, no celebration dinner, just 2 folding chairs and the sound of crickets. Frank cried. He wasn't a man who cried easily, but he cried that night, quiet and unashamed. "This is the proudest day of my life," he told me. "Right after the day you married me." I held his hand and I believed with everything in me that this house would outlast us both. I believed it would hold our family together, long after either of us was gone. A place David could always come home to. A place grandchildren would run through barefoot in summer. I believed a paid-off house meant a family that could never be pulled apart by money, because there wouldn't be any money owed to anyone. I was so sure of that. I look back now, and I understand something I didn't understand then. A house free of debt can still be taken from you. It only has to be free of the right locks. 18 months before that Tuesday on the porch, I hosted David's 40th birthday in that same backyard. I made pot roast the way Frank liked it, low and slow, filling the whole house with the smell of onions and thyme. I strung white lights between the 2 oak trees myself, standing on a wobbly ladder David kept telling me to get off of. His daughter chased fireflies across the lawn until well past dark, shrieking every time she caught one in her cupped hands. The whole family came. Aunts, cousins, David's wife Renee in a yellow sundress, all of them spread across lawn chairs with paper plates balanced on their knees. I was in the kitchen, wrapping leftover cornbread in foil, when David came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my shoulders. "You know this is still the only place that feels like home, Mom," he said quietly, his chin resting on the top of my head the way it did when he was still small enough for me to hold. I had to set the foil down. My eyes went hot and full before I could stop them. Everything Frank and I sacrificed, everything we skipped and scraped and saved for, felt worth it in that single moment. Renee found me later by the dessert table. She complimented the house 3 separate times that night. Not the pot roast, not the lights, not the memories soaked into every wall. The location. How close it was to the good schools. How the lot alone would be worth something someday. I remember thinking it was an odd thing to fixate on at a birthday party. Then I let it go. The way you let go of a stray thought that doesn't seem worth keeping. David's arm stayed around my shoulders for most of that evening. Renee laughed easily. His daughter finally fell asleep on the porch swing, sticky-handed, a jar of fireflies glowing faintly beside her. I wish now I had frozen that exact moment. The lights. The laughter drifted over the fence. David's arm, warm and solid around me, I didn't know it yet. But that was the last night everything between us still felt simple. A few months after that birthday, David started calling more often. Not to talk. To mention things. "That house is a lot of upkeep for one person, Mom," he said one Sunday out of nowhere, while I was still holding the phone against my shoulder and stirring soup. "You should think about downsizing eventually. No rush. No rush." He said that twice. I laughed it off. He was thinking ahead for me, I told myself. That's what a good son does. That was the first flag. I didn't see it as one. Not yet. A few weeks later, David and Renee showed up on a Saturday morning unannounced, a hardware bag in Renee's hand. "We're just here to help," David said, already heading for my bathroom with a drill. By the afternoon, I had a medical alert pendant sitting on my kitchen counter and 2 metal grab bars bolted into the tile above my tub. Nobody had asked me first. Nobody had asked me at all. I stood in that bathroom doorway looking at the holes drilled into walls Frank had tiled himself, and I felt something twist in my stomach. I told myself they meant well. People who love you sometimes forget to ask. I let it go. That was the second flag. The third one, I tried to name out loud. I sat David down the following week and told him as gently as I could that I would appreciate being asked before anything else changed in my home. He sighed, the kind of sigh that makes you feel like the burden before you've even finished your sentence. "You're being a little dramatic, Mom," he said. Renee from the next room muttered just loud enough for me to hear it. "She's difficult to help. Difficult to help." I turned that phrase over for days, but I dropped it. I told myself I didn't want to be the mother who fought her children over grab bars. I wanted peace more than I wanted to be right. That was the third flag, and I let it pass too. The fourth one found me sideways. My friend Carol mentioned over coffee that she'd heard David's contracting business had folded, not slowed down, folded, 8 months earlier. David hadn't told me, not one word. Carol also mentioned carefully that David had been asking around about reverse mortgages, how they worked, whether they applied to homes owned outright by elderly parents. I sat across from her, stirring a coffee I no longer wanted, and told myself there were a dozen innocent reasons a son might ask about reverse mortgages. Maybe it was for a friend. Maybe it was research for someone else entirely. I didn't call and ask him directly. I was afraid of what I already suspected the answer would be. That was the fourth flag, and I buried it under maybes. The fifth one happened in front of witnesses. We were at a family dinner, Renee's parents visiting from out of town, the table crowded with dishes and small talk. I'd forgotten a step in my own pot roast recipe, something I've made 100 times, and mentioned it lightly, laughing at myself. David laughed too, but not with me. "Mom probably won't even remember this conversation tomorrow," he said to his in-laws, grinning like it was nothing. The table laughed. Renee's mother laughed loudest. I sat there with my fork halfway to my mouth, my face burning, my ears ringing faintly the way they do when you've been hit somewhere soft. I told myself it was a joke. Just a joke. Families tease each other. That's what families do. I explained away every single one of those moments. The downsizing comment, the drill holes, the dismissiveness, the secrets. The joke wasn't really a joke at all. I had a lifetime of practice explaining things away, smoothing them over, making myself smaller so the piece could stay bigger. What happened next? I couldn't explain away no matter how hard I tried. I stood on my own porch and called my son. He answered on the second ring, his voice light, almost cheerful, as if he were expecting a different kind of conversation. "Mom, hey, did you get my text? I'm standing outside my house, David, with groceries. I can't get in. I know, it's for your safety. We'll talk this weekend, okay?" I asked him, as calmly as I could manage, what exactly he meant by safety. He hesitated, just slightly. Before the words came out smoother than they should have, he and Renee had already spoken to a lawyer about guardianship options. In case I kept, as he put it, resisting help, I stood very still. Guardianship isn't a word you land on by accident. It isn't a word that comes from one bad Tuesday. New locks don't appear on a door in an afternoon. Someone has to call a locksmith, choose a deadbolt, and schedule the work. Someone has to plan. This had never been spontaneous. It had been coming for a long time, quietly, while I was still laughing off comments about downsizing. I told him I needed to go, and I hung up before my voice could betray anything. My neighbor Ruth let me in without a single question, the way good neighbors do. She put the kettle on and left me alone in her guest room with my phone and my groceries still sitting untouched by her back door. I opened my banking app. I don't know exactly what I was looking for. I only knew I needed to look. There it was. David's name, listed as a joint signer on my savings account added 4 months earlier. I remembered the form now, vaguely. Christmas Eve, the kitchen table, David sliding papers toward me between the pie and the dishes. In case of emergency, he'd said. Just so someone can help you if anything ever happens. I had trusted him enough not to read every line. I sat in Ruth's guest room with the kettle whistling somewhere down the hall, and I understood, finally and completely, what I was looking at. This wasn't a concern. Concern doesn't need a lawyer. Concern doesn't need your name quietly added to someone else's accounts. This was needed. His need, wearing my son's face. I did not cry. I want to be clear about that, because I expected to, and I didn't. What I felt instead was colder than grief and steadier than anger. A strange clean clarity, like a window wiped clean after years of fog. They weren't going to stop, not unless I made them. That night, sitting in my neighbor's guest room, I stopped being someone's mother to manage. I started being someone's problem to reckon with. I spread everything across Ruth's kitchen table. The deed, still bearing only Frank's name and mine, the ink faded but legible. My bank statements. The joint signer form, which I read this time, word for word, line by line, the way I should have read it at Christmas. There it was in plain print. My son's name sitting quietly beside mine, granted access he never should have needed. I called Marion from church, who I knew had gone through something similar with her own daughter 2 winters ago. She gave me a name without hesitation, Denise Falk, elder law attorney. Marion said Denise didn't waste words and didn't lose cases. I called the office at 8 the next morning and had an appointment before 9. Then I got to work. I gathered the original deed into a folder. I found my banking password written in the back of my address book, the one thing David never knew existed. I pulled up every text he'd sent me over the past year, the downsizing comments, the grab bars, the lockout message, and printed them one by one until I had a timeline no lawyer could argue with. I didn't cry once through any of it. There was no confrontation that night. No shouting into the phone, no dramatic declarations. Just a woman at her neighbor's kitchen table, sorting paper into neat, quiet piles until well past midnight. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing. The next morning, I put on my good coat and I went to go take my life back. Denise Falk's office smelled like old books and fresh coffee. She wore reading glasses, pushed up into gray hair, and didn't waste a single motion. She looked over the deed for less than a minute. "This is yours, Margaret. Only yours. Your son has no legal standing here. None." I felt something in my chest loosen just slightly, hearing a stranger confirm what I already knew in my bones. Denise laid out 3 things, ticking them off on her fingers like items on a grocery list. First, a locksmith today to restore my access. Second, a formal letter revoking David as joint signer on my account. Third, a cease and desist regarding any guardianship inquiry made without medical or legal cause. None of this is complicated, she said. It's just overdue. By early afternoon, a locksmith knelt at my own front door, while I watched from my car in the driveway, hands steady on the wheel. It took him 11 minutes to give me my house back. I drove straight to the bank after that and sat across from a young manager who barely blinked as I removed David's name from my account. The form took 4 minutes to sign. 4 minutes to undo 4 months of quiet damage. David arrived at the house that evening, the way he always did, key in hand. It didn't turn. He called me from the porch, confusion first, then something sharper underneath it. "Mom, why doesn't my key work?" "Because it's my house, David. It's always been my house." He called again 20 minutes later. Then again. Then he was standing on my porch in person, and I let him knock without answering, the way silence sometimes says more than any argument could. By 9 that night, a long text arrived. Paragraphs of it. He blamed Renee's financial pressure, the failed business, the fear of losing everything he'd built. He said he never meant it like that he only wanted to help. Renee called an hour later, her voice tight and fast. "What lawyer put these ideas in your head, Margaret? We were only trying to protect you." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "I'll speak with David," I said, "not with you." Then I ended the call. The next afternoon, I invited David to sit with me on the porch. Not inside, the porch, deliberately, where this had all started. He sat across from me, hands clasped, looking smaller than I'd seen him look in years. I laid it all out, one piece at a time, the reverse mortgage inquiries, the guardianship consultation behind my back, the joint account he'd slid across the table on Christmas Eve like a gift instead of a trap. "I love you," I told him. "I have loved you every single day of your life. But I will not disappear from my own life to cover for your mistakes." He was quiet for a long moment. Then something in him broke open. He admitted the business failing had terrified him more than he'd let anyone see. He admitted he hadn't known how to ask for real help, so he'd tried to take control instead, telling himself it was for my own good. For one brief moment, I saw my son again underneath all of it, scared, ashamed. Humans. I stayed calm through all of it. I didn't raise my voice, and I didn't reach for his hand either. "I'm having Denise draw up a document," I told him. "This house passes to you when I die. Not before. And only if nothing like this ever happens again." He nodded, eyes wet, and said he understood. That conversation didn't fix everything, but it was the last time anyone tried to tell me. I was too old to run my own life. 6 months have passed since that afternoon on the porch. I still take my coffee out there most mornings. The same chipped mug, the same wicker chair Frank always meant to replace. The sun comes through the same curtains we hung decades ago, faded now to a soft, honest yellow. I didn't downsize. I repainted the kitchen instead, a warm sage green Frank vetoed for 30 years, claiming it would make the room look smaller. It doesn't. It just looks like mine. David visits twice a month now, usually without Renee. Last Saturday, he came by with a flat of tomato seedlings, and we spent the afternoon on our knees in the dirt behind the house, saying very little, which somehow said quite a lot. He apologized again while we worked. Differently this time. No excuses tucked inside it, no blame passed sideways. Just a simple, steady sorry, the kind that doesn't need anything back from you. I told him I forgave him. I meant it. Forgiveness was never the hard part for me. Trust is a slower thing. It's being rebuilt in small pieces. One visit, one honest conversation at a time. I still believe in family. I believe in it as much as I ever did. I just no longer believe that peace is worth keeping if it requires my own silence to hold it together. Some evenings I sit with Frank's photo on the mantel, the one from our porch the night we made our last mortgage payment, and I talk to him the way I always have, quietly, like he might still be listening. I kept our promise, I told him. The house held on, and so did I. Protecting someone should never require erasing them. Family isn't a group of people who can do anything to you and call it love. It's the people who ask first. The greatest inheritance I can leave my son isn't a house. It's the example of a mother who wouldn't disappear quietly. Age doesn't make you incapable. It makes you harder to fool. I didn't lock him out of my life. I just finally locked the right people in.